Good morning, friends. Welcome to the lecture on law of torts. The topic of this session is vicarious liability, including state liability. In this session, we will discuss about the concept of the vicarious liability. Myself, Dr. Deepak Miglani. It's a very important session for the students who are going for judicial services, NET, CLAT, LLB, LLM students, as well as anyone who wants to have a good knowledge in the field of law. My WhatsApp number is 09215514435. For any query, you may send email to me at my email ID legalbuddy@gmail.com. For regular updates of my videos on law, you may subscribe my YouTube channel @Deepak Miglani. Our website is www.legalpoint.in. I expect from you to share my videos on your Facebook wall as well as with your friends so that they will also be benefited by this. Let us start with the concept of the vicarious liability. Before starting with this session, first of all, I just want to give you a brief introduction what we are going to study in this. First of all, we try to understand what is the meaning of the term vicarious liability. In general sense, we can say that when you are made liable for the acts of others, in general sense, you can say when you are made liable for acts of others, so that is stated as acts of others, so that liability is stated as a vicarious liability. In this, first of all, we try to understand the different association in which you are liable. First, principal and agent, right? Second, we discuss about the relationship in the partners because they are also liable vicariously, right? Third, the relationship between the master and servant, right? As well as we try to discuss the term about course of employment, right? Moreover, in this session, we also discuss the concept of vicarious liability of the state. Right? The judicial trends, as well as the difference between the sovereign and non-sovereign function, right? So that is the basic idea, non-sovereign function. All these things we are going to discuss in this session. Okay, let us start with this session, take by one. Let us start with the first term here, that is the named as vicarious liability. When we talk about the term of vicarious liability, in general sense, I can say you that vicarious liability is the liability when you are made liable for acts of others. So that type of liability is basically named as vicarious liability. Okay. In generally, everyone is liable for their own acts, but sometimes a condition arises in which you are held responsible for the torts or for the acts committed by others. So that term is basically named as vicarious liability, right? It's a liability incurred of others. So what we can say that vicarious liability is liability incurred of others, right? Let us take a few examples here. Liability of the principal for the tort of an agent. Suppose you have hired an agent, right? And the work of the agent is to sell the things on your behalf, right? Now, while selling, he make a fraud with a customer, right? In that case, you will be held liable for that. We can say that any tort committed by the agent, in that you will be liable. Okay. Similarly, any liability of the master on the behalf of the servant, in this case also the master will be liable, right? Thus we can say that that is the case of the vicarious liability. Now, vicarious liability is a kind of strict liability, right? We have two type of liabilities. First one is named as a strict liability and second one is named as absolute liability, right? The basic difference between the strict and absolute liability is, in strict liability you can save yourself if some exceptions are there. Means there are some exceptions in which you are not to be held liable. On the other hand, when you take the case of the absolute liability, it is without any exception. Absolute liability basically without any exception, right? So thus concept of the vicarious liability is sort of a strict liability, right? However, in vicarious liability, the liability arises because of the association between the principal and the wrongdoer. But generally, in the case of the strict liability, the liability arises of the wrongs done by yourself. Liability arises of the wrongs done by the person himself, right? So that is in the case of the strict liability, right? But in the vicarious liability, you are liable for the acts of the others. Let us take the different type of vicarious liabilities. First one is the relationship of the principal and agent, right? A principal is always liable for his agent's act if same has to be done in the course of the performance of the duty of the agent, right? Here the important term is there that course of performance of the duty means whatever work has been assigned to the agent, if he does any tort, right, during the course of performance of the duty, in that case the principal would be held liable, right? For example, where a principal expressly or impliedly, here we have two terms, one is expressly or impliedly, right? By both means, if he authorizes his agents, by both means, if he authorizes his agent to do anything on his behalf, for that he is liable of acts of the agent that have been done during the course of the employment, right? Where the owner of a car asked his friend to drive the car and it caused an action, the owner would be held liable, right? For example, if a car owner asks his friend to drive the car, right, and it goes to an accident, in that case also we can say that the owner would be held liable. So that is the case of the principal and agent. Here the major part is by expressly or impliedly you have authorized, right? And the second thing is that in the course of the performance of the duty, if he commits any tort, in that case principal is held liable. Next one is liability in case of the partners, right? We know that partners in a partnership firm, all partners are the same. In a partnership firm, every partner is jointly and severally liable for the acts of the other partners, right? Means if any partnership, a partner commits any tort in the ordinary course of the business. Here the important term is also here, in the ordinary course of the business, right? In that case, other partner would be held liable jointly and severally for the acts of the partners, right? But important point that you have to take care of, that tort have to be committed in the ordinary course of the business, right? For example, let us take an example. There are three partners ABC, right? They made a partnership. Their work, they have a shop. They have a shop of shoes. They have a shop of the shoes, right? She was involved in gambling. She was involved in gambling, right? Now, for any liability that have been arisen because of the gambling, for that A and B partner would not be held liable. The reason behind it, because that gambling is not in ordinary course of the business. The gambling is not in ordinary course of the business, right? For that A and B partner would not be held liable, right? There may be a case, let us say what B does, B makes a fraud, right? And he sells the shoes of under quality. Or we can say he sells duplicate shoes. He sells duplicate shoes in the shop. Now, in that case, both A and C partners would be held liable because selling of the duplicate shoes in the shop is in the ordinary course of the business, right? So in that case, partners would be held liable jointly and severally. But if that is not in the ordinary course of the business, in that case, partners would not be held liable. Third one is the liability in case of the master and servant, right? Let us try to understand the concept that in generally, a master is liable for the torts committed by the servant while acting in the course of employment. Here, important term is a master would be held liable while acting in course of employment. Any work done by the servant during the course of the employment, for that master would be held liable. If that is not done in the course of the employment, for that master will not be held liable, right? That type of liability of the master and servant is a special branch in the tort, which is basically known as joint tortfeasor, right? it's basically known as joint tortfeasor. In that case also the liability of the master is joint and several, means the master can be made liable for all acts done by the servant during the course of the employment, right? Now we have to understand that from where this liability has got its origin, right? Here we have a important maxim that is named as respondent superior, that is named as respondent superior. That simply means let the principal be liable, let the principal be liable, right? It puts the master in the same position as he had done the act by himself, right? So here important maxim is that is named as respondent superior, respondent superior, right? What does it actually mean? It actually means that let the principal be liable, right? That simply means if an act has been done by the servant in the course of the employment, the master would be held liable as he himself has done that act, right? This particular liability also got its origin from a very famous maxim, qui facit per alium facit per se. Qui facit per alium facit per se. What do you mean by this? It simply means that he who does an act through another is deemed in law to do it by himself, right? It means that कोई भी आदमी कोई ऐसा काम करता है, किसी दूसरे से ऐसा काम कराए, तो लॉ की नजर में लॉ उसे ये मानेगा कि ये काम उसने किया है, right? It simply means that he who does an act through another is deemed in the law to do the act by himself. So that particular liability has also got its origin from this maxim, qui facit per alium facit per se, right? Now there is one more thing, is that why this type of liability has been there, that is for fulfilling the purpose of public policy, social convenience as well as the justice, right? The reason behind it that suppose I have a servant, let us say I am the owner, right? I have a servant named as B, right? I hired him to sell liquor. I hired him to sell liquor, right? Whatever liquor, the liquor that I provide to B, that B has to sell, right? Now because of that liquor, by consuming of that liquor, number of persons have been died. Number of persons have been died, right? Now I am also liable for this. Why? The reason behind it that he is my servant, right? And for the acts of the servant, the master is also liable when he expressly or impliedly authorizes his servant to do the act, right? So here we can say that because I have hired B for selling the liquor, right? Hence I will be liable for the acts of the B, and because of the liquor, if number of persons have been died, so I would be held liable. It's a matter of the public policy, means every master would be liable for the acts of the servant, whatever he has done during the course of business. Okay. Next term that is important here to understand, what do you mean by the servant? Means who is a servant, right? In general sense, when we talk about a servant is a person employed by another to do a work under the direction and control of the employer, right? That we know that he is a person employed by another, right? Here the important term is that he has to do work under direction and control, under direction and control, right? Under direction and control. A person is said to be your servant, yeah, he is working on your behalf if he is under your direction and control, right? That's the important term here, direction and control. A master will always be liable for the tort committed by servant only. A servant, there is a difference between the servant and independent contractor. There is a difference between servant and independent contractor, right? And independent contractor is one who undertakes to do a work. Regarding the manner in which the work is to be done, he is own master, right? Here we have to understand what is the difference between the servant and independent contractor, right? Because master is held liable for the acts of the servant, not of independent contractor, because when we talk about independent contractor is his master himself, right? When you hire a man to do a particular work, right, and that man is working in his own capacity, so that man is basically named as independent contractor, right? For understanding this, let us take an example. Suppose I have a servant to drive my car, right? I have employed a driver, right? He is my servant. he is driving my car. If while driving my car, he is my servant, right? If he commits an accident, in that case, I will be held liable for that. Okay. On the other hand, when we talk about, suppose you hire a taxi from a company, you hire a taxi from a company, right? After hiring the taxi, if the driver of the taxi, if the driver of the taxi committed an accident, right? In that case, I am not liable. In that case, I am not liable because that is the independent contractor, right? Because here, hiring of a taxi is a case of an independent contractor. I am not the master for that taxi, right? So here we can say that that is the actual definition of the servant, means when the person whom I engage, he is under my direction and control, right? And we have to also take the difference between servant and independent contractor. For the acts of the servant, master is liable, right? But for the acts of the independent contractor, the master is not liable. Okay. But there are some exceptional cases in which employer may be held liable for the works of the contractor, right? Because it's a part of a strict liability, right? For example, an employer authorizes the doing of an illegal act of a tort. A passenger of a taxi orders the taxi driver to drive fast, right? For example, you hired a taxi, right? That taxi driver is an independent contractor, right? But you instruct the taxi driver to drive fast. Taxi driver to drive fast, right? And on your instruction, he started to drive fast and it committed an accident, right? In that case, you can say that in that case you can say that although the taxi driver is an independent contractor, but still the master would be held liable, right? Or in starting, you have not instructed him, but subsequently you ratifies the same. In that case also, the master would be held liable in case of the independent contractor, right? Or in a case where employer carelessly appoint an contractor, means employer does not pay any attention for appointing a contractor. In that case, that would be liable, right? An employer may be liable for the negligence of the independent contractor if he carelessly appoints an independent contractor where the risk of harm is foreseeable, right? In that case also, the master would be held liable. Let's try to understand the further. Recent trend include even those persons in the category of the servant who are not subject to the control, right? Earlier, when we talk about who is a servant, we know that servant is someone who is under the whole management and control of the master, right? But because as earlier I told you that torts is no specific lies there for the torts, it is based on the judicial decisions, right? So sometime as per to the circumstances, right? Here as per to the circumstances, master would be held liable even where he is not under the full control of the servant. Okay. Here the important term is to understand the difference. Important term to understand is the power of control, right? In a very famous case, Mersey Docks and Harbour Board versus Griffith Liverpool Limited 1947. What happened in that case, right? In that case that a harbour board let out a mobile crane along with a skilled driver to certain stevedores for loading a ship, right? There is a company, harbour board company, what they have done, they have let out their machine with a skilled driver to a ship, right? The work of the the work of the driver is to put the goods from the other on the ship, right? Due to the negligence of the driver while loading the ship, X was injured. A person on the ship, he was injured, right? In that case, that harbour board would be held liable. The reason behind it that harbour board would be held liable. The reason behind it that harbour board that was permanent employer was held liable, because here in that case that harbour board was a permanent employer. Hence, we can say that harbour board would be held liable, right? Similarly, in case of Srimati Kundan Kaur versus Shankar Singh 1966, it's a case of Punjab High Court. What happened in that case? The partners of a firm temporarily gave their truck along with their driver on hire to a transport company for transporting certain goods, right? What they have done, they have given their truck on hire to a transport company. Now what happened? Due to the rash and negligent driving of the driver, the vehicle met with an accident. An employee of the transport company was killed. Right? The court observed that there was only a transfer of the service, not the transfer of the control of the driver from the general employer to the hirer of the vehicle. Right? And in that case also, only transfer of the service, not the control of the driver. Hence, that transport company would be held liable. Right? Here important term is that if because of the negligent act of the driver, if an accident is caused, right? Because the permanent employer of the driver was the transport company, right? Hence, transport company would be held liable for the rash and negligent acts of the driver, and for that, whatever the effects are there, that employer would be held liable for that, right? So that was held in the case of श्रीमती कुंदन कौल वर्सेस शंकर सिंह 1966. देखो यहाँ से हमें एक बात समझ में आती है, आपकी कंपनी है, ठीक है, आपने ट्रक अपना किसी को हायर पे दिया, राइट, एंड दैट ट्रक met with an accident because of the negligent act of the driver. क्योंकि आपने अपना ट्रक किसी को हायर पे दिया है, राइट, जो ड्राइवर है वो आपका एम्प्लॉय है, he is under your control, right? वो अगर आपके कंट्रोल में है तो that simply means that you would be held liable for the acts of the driver. If an accident is committed, तो for the accident the compensation have to be paid by you, right? तो important term यहाँ पर क्या होती है? Management and control of the employee, or we can say that control on the employee, right? If control is in your hand, then you are the master and you will be held liable for the acts of that particular employee, right? Important term here is the course of employment. Whatever has to be done by the servant, that have to be done during the course of the employment, right? The wrong falls within the course of the employment of the servant if it is necessarily incidental to do something which the servant is employed to, right? It's a basic definition. What do you exactly mean by the course of the employment? Whatever work has been done by the servant, if that is incidental to something which the servant is supposed to do, okay, and that is taken as a course of employment, right? An act falls within the course of employment when either the master has authorized the same or it is a wrongful mode of doing some authorized act, right? Let us take an example here. What happened? Authorize a driver to drive and he drives negligently, right? That means I have authorized a driver to drive, right? Now, to drive is the course of employment of the driver, because when we talk about the driver, the work of the driver is to drive, right? Now that driving is the course of employment. Now while driving, if he drives negligently and if some accident is there, for that employer would be liable, right? क्या समझ में आता है? मैंने एक ड्राइवर को एम्प्लॉय किया, ठीक है, ड्राइवर को एम्प्लॉय करने के बाद ड्राइवर का काम है ड्राइव करना, तो ड्राइव करना ड्राइवर के लिए कोर्स ऑफ एम्प्लॉयमेंट है, ठीक है। अब ड्राइव करते करते वो नेग्लिजेंटली बिहेव करता है, एक्सीडेंट कर देता है, तो उसके लिए मास्टर वुड बी हेल्ड लायबल। द रीजन इज दैट बिकॉज वट एवर द ड्राइवर इज डूइंग, ही इज डूइंग ड्यूरिंग द कोर्स ऑफ हिज एम्प्लॉयमेंट, राइट। सिमिलरली authorize a servant to deal with the clients and he deals fraudulently, right? For example, you have a law firm, right? In the law firm, you have employed a clerk, right? And with the clerk, important documents of the clients are there. What the clerk has done, he fraudulently misuses the document, right? Now the idea is the client has given the documents to the clerk on the behalf of the lawyer, not on the behalf of the clerk, right? And while doing the work, because the client knows that the clerk is doing on the behalf of the lawyer, right? And while doing, the clerk makes a fraud, for that the master would be held liable, right? So that is a case of course of employment. Whatever he is doing, that's a course of employment, right? In both cases, we can say that the master would be held liable. Both work have to be done into the course of employment, right? But let us take one more example. Suppose you have sent your servant to the market for purchasing something, right? In the market, he fought with someone, right? And he utters defamatory words. Now, for those defamatory words, the master would not be held liable. The reason is that because here the course of employment is to purchase some article from the market, right? Right. So that fight or that utterance of the defamatory words is not under the course of employment, right? Hence, we can say that In this case, the work is not under the course of employment, hence master would not be held liable. Okay, let us take few more examples so that you are better understand with the help of the cases. There is a case Lloyd versus Grace and Smith Company. Let us try to understand what happened in that case. Lloyd versus Grace Smith and Company, right? Where a managing clerk of a firm of advocates, while attending a client on behalf of the firm, fraudulently got the property of the client transferred in his name, right? So in that case, what we can say that the act done by the clerk was done in the course of the employment, right? Because the clients knows the lawyers, right? And they know that whatever the managing clerk is doing, that is upon the instruction of the lawyers, right? Because it's a firm of solicitors, right? So in that case, the work done by the managing clerk is a part of the done in the course of employment. Hence, we can say that the firm is held liable. That is in the case of Lloyd versus Grace and Smith and Company. Okay. Let's take one more example. State Bank of India versus Shama Devi, 1978 Supreme Court. Right. Now, it's an exception to that case. It's an exception to this rule. It's not an exception, but it simply tells us that it's not a course of employment. For example, जैसे पहले मैं समझते हैं, एक आदमी बैंक में जाता है, राइट? बैंक में देयर वाज ए क्लर्क ए. ये आदमी ए क्लर्क को जानता था, उसका फ्रेंड था, और वो ए क्लर्क को 1 लाख रुपीज का चेक दे देता है. ठीक है? बिकॉज ही नोज हिम वेरी वेल एंड ही गिव्स हिम 1 लाख चेक बिकॉज ही इज द फ्रेंड ऑफ दैट पर्टिकुलर पर्सन. अब ए क्या करता है? ए इस 1 लाख चेक को फ्रॉडुलेंटली कैश करवा लेता है और 1 लाख रुपीज को अपने पास रख लेता है. अब जो ये बी पर्सन है जिसने 1 लाख का चेक ए को दिया था, why he has given the check to A? Because he finds A to be his friend, right? Now B cannot ask the compensation from the bank to pay the money. The reason behind it, it was not in the course of employment that A has done. B ने A को check दिया, being a friend, right? Not as an employee of the bank. Okay, so that happened in that case, State Bank of India versus Shama Devi, 1978 Supreme Court, right? A customer of the bank gives some amount or check to the bank employee in capacity as a friend, not as a capacity as a customer, right? For being deposited the check into the account without obtaining any receipt for the same. What the bank employee has done, bank employee is not deemed to be acting within the scope of his employment. Here the bank employee, if the bank employee does not deposit the amount in the account of the person, in that case the bank employee is not acting within the scope of his employment, right? Because that person knows the bank employee as a friend, right? In that case, the bank would not be held liable, right? That was the case of State Bank of India versus Shama Devi, 1978 Supreme Court. Similarly, in the case of Century Insurance Company Limited versus Northern Ireland, 1942, what happened in that case? A servant, the driver of a petrol lorry, while transferring petrol from the lorry to an underground tank, matched to light a cigarette, right? And because of the lighting of the cigarette, there was a fire explosion and damage to B's property. Okay. Now, in this case, it was held that the act of the driver was held to be in the course of the employment, right? And for that, A would be held liable for the same. Okay. जनरल समझे, आप किसी अपने सर्वेंट को पेट्रोल की लॉरी के साथ में पेट्रोल पंप पे भेजते हैं, ठीक है? और आपका काम क्या है? पेट्रोल पंप पर लेना, पेट्रोल को कलेक्ट करके लेके आना है. आपको पेट्रोल चाहिए था, आपने अपने सर्वेंट को भेजा पेट्रोल लेके आने के लिए. अब आपका सर्वेंट पेट्रोल पंप पे पहुंच जाता है, पेट्रोल की लॉरी के अंदर पेट्रोल लोड हो रहा है. आपका सर्वेंट वहां पर एक सिगरेट जलाने के लिए माचिस आग जलाता है और उस आग के कारण एक फायर एक्सप्लोजन हो जाता है, राइट? नाउ यू कैनॉट डिनाई द फैक्ट दैट lighting of a matchbox for the cigarette is not in the course of employment. That is not a defense. The reason is that because you have sent your employee there, it's your duty to instruct your employees not to do any act there of this type that will cause a suffering, right? Hence, in this case, that the act of the drivers were held to be in the course of the employment. Hence, A would be held liable in Century Insurance Company Limited versus Northern Ireland, 1942. Similarly, in a case Beard versus London General Omnibus Company 1900. What happened in that case? At the end of the journey, the driver of the bus went to take for a dinner. During his temporary absence, the conductor drove the bus for making a turn to make it ready for the next journey, and he negligently caused an accident. He negligently caused an accident, right? In that case, the master would not be held liable. The reason is that the act done by the conductor is not in the course of employment, because it is the duty of the driver to drive the bus, right? It's not the duty of the conductor. If conductor does it, whatever the conductor has done, he has done it in his own capacity. The work of the conductor is not to drive the bus, right? Hence we can say that the master would not be held liable. But in that case, if driver authorizes the conductor, to turn the bus, in that case master would be held liable, right? But practically in this case, what happened? The conductor has drove the bus without any express or implied instruction either by the master or by the driver, right? And an accident was caused. So in that case, we can say that the master would not be held liable. So that was observed in that case, that master would not be held liable because act of the conductor was not in the course of employment. Okay. Similarly, in a case, Limpus versus London General Omnibus Company, 1862, in that case, the major point was that employer may be held liable even if he forbids his servant for doing a certain act. मतलब अगर एम्प्लॉयर अपने एम्प्लॉय को पहले से कहता है कि ऐसी गलती नहीं करनी है और आपका एम्प्लॉय वैसी गलती करता है जिसके कारण नुकसान हो जाता है, इस केस में भी मास्टर की लायबिलिटी खत्म नहीं होगी. मास्टर वुड बी हेल्ड लायबल, राइट? मींस लेट अस टेक एन एग्जांपल. द डिफेंडेंट्स ड्राइवर इन डिफाइंस ऑफ द एक्सप्रेस इंस्ट्रक्शन by his employer not to race with other omnibuses while driving, but driver, even he was instructed not to race with other buses, he negligently racing with other buses and it resulted in an accident, right? In that case also the master would be held liable, right? A master cannot escape from the liability by saying that I have forbidden my servant not to do acts, not to go for the racing, still master would be held liable, right? So what we can say that till time whatever we have understood that all these are showing the course of employment. All these are showing about course of employment. If an act done by your servant is under the course of employment, right? In that case, master would be held liable. And if the acts are such that they are not in the course of employment, for that master would not be held liable, right? So that is the first part of the session. In that we have done the three type of vicarious liabilities. First of all, the liability of the principal and agent, then liability of the partners, and third one is liability of master and servants. Let us take the second part of this, that is the vicarious liability of the state. Let's take the second part, that is named as vicarious liability of the state, right? In England, because we know that our constitution more or less is borrowed from England. The reason behind it, because we are under the rule of England, right? In 1947, an act was passed named as Crown Proceedings Act 1947, right? In this act, the Crown was made liable for a tort committed by its servant, just like a private master. Okay. Before 1947, the Crown was not held liable, but that act expressly states that Crown would be held liable for all the acts of the servant, as in the case of the private master and servant. Similar provision is also provided under Article 300 of our Indian Constitution, where it is not same as to the Crown Proceeding Act 1947. That simply tells us that Union of India and the states can be sue and be sued, but as to the circumstances under which that can be done before the commencement of the Constitution. हमारे कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन में आर्टिकल 300 की लैंग्वेज थोड़ी सी ट्रिकी है. इसमें डायरेक्टली नहीं बताया गया कि स्टेट और यूनियन को आप शू कर सकते हैं इन द केस एज वाज स्टेटेड इन क्राउन प्रोसीडिंग एक्ट 1947. इसमें यह बताया गया है आप यूनियन और स्टेट को शू कर सकते हैं किस केस के अंदर, जैसा हमारे कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन के स्टार्ट होने से पहले जो सर्कमस्टांसेस थे, उसी सर्कमस्टांसेस के अंदर आप यूनियन और स्टेट को शू कर सकते हैं, राइट। एंड वी नो दैट बिफोर अवर कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन देयर वाज गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया एक्ट 1935 दैट आल्सो लेड द सिमिलर प्रोविजन, right? And the earliest enactment laid down that Secretary of the State of India could be issued just an East India Company. Thus, liability of the state is today as that of East India Company in its time. So, what we can say that liability of the state is the same as that of East India Company at that time. East India Company. The reason behind it that no specific provision have been made. That area is a gray area in which no specific provision have been made. It is simply stated by our constitutional experts that whatever was prevailing earlier before the commencement of the constitution, that in 1935 act also, it was stated that before enactment of the 1935, what were the prevailing before that commencement of the 1935 act, same will follow, right? And before 1935, in all other acts, no specific provision was made. Thus, we can infer that whatever is the case of East India Company, same will be applied here, right? So that is vicarious liability of the state. Under what article? Article 300. We can go to its origin. Now, important term here is whether this vicarious liability of the state is a strict liability or absolute liability. Means if it is strict liability, means some defenses can be taken, and if you say it's an absolute liability, no such defense can be taken, right? Whether it is a defense for the state that tort committed by the servant was in discharge or obligation imposed by the law or not. Sometime a defense has been taken by the state that the tort is committed by the servant while in discharging of the obligation imposed by the law. In England, no such defense is applicable. In England, no such defense is applicable. Means in England we can say that that's the rule of absolute liability. In England we can say that that's the rule of absolute liability because no such defense has been taken. Whatever tort have been committed by the servants, the crown would be held liable. But in India, although no specific provision have been made, but it is Supreme Court who from time to time has varied from it. From time to time has varied from it. In India, in some cases, Supreme Court has considered it as a defense. So just start with the cases of the Supreme Court. In State of Rajasthan versus Vidyavati, State of Rajasthan versus Vidyavati, 1962 Supreme Court. Supreme Court has observed that state shall be held liable just as an ordinary employer. In that case, Supreme Court has observed that state have to be held liable just like an ordinary employer, like in England under Crown Proceeding Act 1947. But 3 years after, in 1965, in a case where Supreme Court has given a decision totally opposite to that case, right? So what's the observation made by the Supreme Court? It is stated by the Supreme Court that if an act of the government servant was one which is considered to be delegation of the sovereign power, for those state would not be held liable, right? In that case, what Supreme Court has done, Supreme Court has tried to make a difference between the sovereign and non-sovereign powers. Means whatever acts are done by the employee or servant under sovereign powers. Under sovereign power means under discharge of the obligation imposed by the law. For those acts, state would not be held liable. For those acts, state would not be held liable because they are of the sovereign powers, right? But the acts which are not from the sovereign power, for that state would not be held liable. That was a decision given by the Supreme Court in 1965 in case of Kasturi Lal Ratia Ramjay versus State of UP. The decision given by the Supreme Court in 1965, later in a case in Nagendra Rao and Company versus State of AP, in that case the Supreme Court has reversed the decision whatever they have given earlier. Supreme Court has given that in the context of the modern concept of sovereignty, there is not any distinction between the sovereign and non-sovereign functions, right? The reason behind given that Supreme Court has stated that the functions of the modern welfare state are not confined only to maintaining law and order, but also extend for engaging all type of activities. Because Supreme Court has stated that earlier the function of the state was only sovereign. The state was not involving in another activities, but because of for fulfilling the concept of the welfare state, the state activities are not only for law and order but also for economic, social and commercial, right? For that, Supreme Court has stated that no legal system can place the state above the law, right? So in the Nagendra Rao case versus state of AP, that Supreme Court has reversed the decision whatever it has stated early in the Kasturi Lal Ralia Ram Jai versus state of UP. Here there is a need to understand what actually happened in that case. In that case, due to the negligent act and officers of the state of the a citizen suffers a damage because of the acts of the officers of the states officers. A citizen suffers damage. A citizen suffers loss, right? In this case, appellant huge stock of food grains and fertilizers was seized. The stock of the appellant was seized, right? And he was later found not guilty. He was later found not guilty. Okay. And when he went to take the delivery of the stock has been spoiled. Stock has been spoiled. In that case, he got compensation from the state, and Supreme Court has observed that we cannot say the seizing of the stock is a sovereign function of the state. There is no distinction between the sovereign and non-sovereign function. Hence, state could not claim any immunity, right? So further, at the present time, Supreme Court is taking the case, the decision given in Nagendra Rao and Company versus state of AP. Okay. Similarly, because that area is a grey area, in 1956 also Law Commission of India also given its report for the state liability. They had given the 4 exceptions here. First one is they stated that the following should be out of the state liability. First, act of the state, it means that an act of the sovereign power directly against another sovereign power. For that, state could not be held liable. All these are the recommendations given by the Law Commission of India in first report. Second is for the judicial acts. It means acts done by judicial officers and the persons executing warrants. Third one is acts done in exercise of the political functions of the state, like foreign affairs, war and peace. For that, the state cannot be held liable. And next is that acts done in relation to the defense forces. Okay. Now in case to case, number of cases are there where Supreme Court has given some instances of the sovereign functions. Let us take in case of Bakshi Amrik versus Union of India. In the case of Bakshi Amrik versus Union of India, in that case it was observed that maintenance of defense forces, construction of maintenance of defense forces means construction of military roads, construction of military roads, construction of military roads, as well as the distribution of meals to the army personnel, right? All these are the parts of maintenance of defense forces. They are a part of the sovereign function. As well as in the case of state of MP versus Chironji Lal, where Supreme Court has observed that maintenance of law and order is a sovereign function. If the plaintiff is injured while police personnel are dispersing unlawful crowd, or plaintiff loudspeaker set is damaged when the police making a lathi charge, in that case it's a sovereign function and state could not be held liable. So all these are the examples of the sovereign function. Let us say a few more examples of non-sovereign functions. Maintenance of the dockyard, right? It's sort of a commercial function, right? In case of P&O Steam Navigation Company case, it's a non-sovereign function. Similarly, in Roop Ram versus the state of Punjab, 1961, a truck belonging to the Public Work Department carrying material for construction of a road bridge, that could not be taken as a sovereign function. In a famine relief work, Sham Sundar versus state of Rajasthan, that is not a sovereign function of the state, right? Means these are the just examples which are not a part of the sovereign function. State of Rajasthan versus Vidyavati, government jeep being taken from the workshop to the collector bungalow for the collectors use, right? It's not a sovereign function. That could not be taken as sovereign function. Carrying military jawan from railway station to the unit headquarters, that could not be a sovereign function, right? During the peace. Similarly, carrying rations, supplies within the country during peace time in the course of the movement of troops, right? That are not sovereign function. Okay. Carrying Air Force officers for playing hockey and basketball in Satyavarti Devi versus Union of India, it's not a sovereign function. Bringing back military officers from the place of exercise to the college of the combat in Nandaram Hiralal versus Union of India, it is not a sovereign function. Taking a truck for imparting training to the new MT recruits, transporting of a machine and other equipment to the military training school, means the sovereign functions are very limited, right? All these are not a part of the sovereign function. Okay. In Roopchand, in Rooplal versus Union of India, right? In that case, where some military jawan found some firewood lying by the riverside and carried the same way for the purpose of the campfire and fuel, that is not a sovereign function of the state, right? Now here what we can say that, we can simply say that the present law that deals with the liability of the state is not satisfactory, right? Because nowhere any clear provision have been mentioned whether state would be held liable for that or not. If proper legislation is required in this regard, it is left to the court to develop the law according to the views of the judges, right? The position prevailing before the commencement of the constitution remains unchanged, though the parliament and the state legislature have been empowered to pass a law to change the position that were provided under Article 300. In the absence of any law, it would be in consonance and social justice demanded by the changed conditions and concept of welfare state that the court will follow the recent decision of the Supreme Court rather than Kasturi Lal. Now, in Kasturi Lal, as earlier I told you, in 1965, Supreme Court has made a differentiation between the sovereign and non-sovereign function of the state, and Supreme Court has stated that for the sovereign function, the state will not be held liable. But later on, in number of cases, as in Nagendra Rao case in 1994, Supreme Court has stated that because the work of the state is not only to have the sovereign function, being a welfare state, state has to also do number of acts, right? For that, we cannot say there is any distinction between the sovereign and non-sovereign function, and liability of the state must be absolute in this regard, as was in Crown Proceeding Act 1947, right? So instead of any clear law, it is on the discretion of the judges to form the law as per to the circumstances of the case. Okay. Torts committed in exercise of the statutory duty. Now it's a special heading here. While pursuing the statutory duties, if any tort is committed, for that, who will be held liable, right? In India, tort committed while performing in discharge of the obligation imposed by the law has been considered to be as a defense. However, for that, it is necessary that tortious action must be in the pursuance of the sovereign function. That was an earlier case of 1950. That earlier I told you, 1950, that case Ram Ghulam versus State of UP, Kasturi Lal case in 1965, right? A Kasturi Lal case in 1965. In all these cases, that would be taken as a defense, right? But later on, now in the recent cases, Supreme Court is not taking this as a defense, right? What happened in Ram Ghulam case versus State of UP? But in the present time, these cases are of no relevance for the Supreme Court, right? What happened in that case? The police authority recovered some stolen property and deposited the same in the Malkhana. The property was again stolen from Malkhana. The government of the UP was held not liable for the same to the owner of the property, as the government servants were performing obligation imposed by the law, right? Similarly, in Kasturi Lal case also, the state would not be held liable, but these were the cases before 1965, right? But when we talk about the recent trends, in the recent trends, in all cases, Supreme Court is taking a different view, as in the case of State of Gujarat versus Memon Muhammad in 1967, it was held that after seizure, the position of the government was that of a bailee, right? And if government does not perform their duty, so in that case the government had to pay compensation, right? In the case in state law, state of Gujarat versus Memon Muhammad, Supreme Court has given a different view as it was taken by the Supreme Court in Ram Ghulam versus state of UP, right? Similarly, in People's Union for Democratic Rights versus Police Commissioner Delhi in 1990, state was ordered for pay compensation to innocent victims of the police firing, right? So here the state cannot take a defense of the police firing that it was for fulfilling the sovereign function of maintaining law and order, right? In that case, state has ordered to pay compensation to the innocent victims in the case of People's Union for Democratic Rights versus Police Commissioner Delhi 1990, right? Similarly, one more case, that is Sebastian M. Hongri versus Union of India in 1984. Exemplary damages was awarded for disappearance of two persons in the military custody, right? It's a defense taken by the military that it's an sovereign function to arrest the persons, right? But those persons have been disappeared. For that, exemplary damages were given in that case, right? Similarly, in Bhim Singh versus state of J&K in 1986, Rudal Shah versus state of Bihar in 1983, it stated that the state was held liable for wrongful detention and monetary compensation was awarded to the persons, although detention is a sovereign function of the state for maintaining law and order. But in case of the wrongful detention, the state have to pay monetary compensation. And latest in 1994, N. Nagendra Rao and Company versus state of AP 1994. In that case, appellant huge food stock and grain was seized. Later, he was not found guilty, right? And stock has been spoiled without any care by the government employees, right? In that case, state is said to be held liable, right? So in that case, now presently, if I observe all the cases, after case of 1965 of Kasturi Lal, in almost every case, Supreme Court has taken a trend that sovereign function of the state, also the state would be held liable. Okay, so here what we can say in the final concluding remark, what we can say that no specific law is there on this particular area, right? So it is expected for the from the government to make a specific law to define whether the state would be held liable, or in what particular event state would be held liable, or in what event state would not be held liable. So this is end to our lecture about the topic of vicarious liability as well as vicarious liability of the state. I hope you enjoyed the session. Thank you very much. You may send your feedback on my email ID legalbuddy@gmail.com or my WhatsApp number 092 155 14435. I expect from you to share my videos on your Facebook wall so that they will also be benefited by this. Thank you very much.